Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back. Imagine your feet sinking into warm, baked mud. The sun isn't just beating down, it's bullying everything beneath it. No trees, no lakes, no relief. Just endless horizon and two rivers carving their way through a land so dry, you swear even the air feels thirsty. This is Mesopotamia, the so-called cradle of civilization. Though honestly, you probably wouldn't survive more than a week here without a very good water plan. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time is right now. I always love seeing those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across cracked earth, following the ghost of a breeze. The air shimmers. The only sound is the crunch of dry soil beneath your feet. This is southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, a place where rainfall comes rarely, if at all. In a good year, you might get 10 inches of rain. That's not enough to grow barley, let alone support a city. And yet, somehow cities rise. It all starts with water. Always. The Tigris and Euphrates are not gentle streams. They're powerful, messy, and unpredictable. One spring, they flood too high and wash away your crops. The next, they barely trickle, starving your fields. But they're all you've got. And if you can master them, even just a little, you can thrive. It's easy to think of water as something we modern folks manage with taps and faucets. But here, you live and die by mud and muscle. A single failed irrigation season could mean famine. A surprise flood could wipe out months of work. And yet they stayed, built, rebuilt, all for the sake of turning a bone-dry desert into something vaguely green. You pass the bones of a failed attempt. A collapsed canal, walls slumped like soggy bread. Someone miscalculated. Or maybe the river changed its mind, as rivers often do. Historians still argue whether climate changes or human error were more to blame when entire regions were abandoned. One quirky trick the early settlers tried, planting trees in rows alongside irrigation ditches. Not for shade, but to keep wind from blowing soil into the water. It didn't always work. Sometimes the trees just died, but sometimes they stood tall, guardians of the water. You imagine the first people who tried this, nomads turned farmers, gamblers betting their survival on the idea that water could be convinced to behave. They built furrows by hand, dug ditches with shoulder blades of cattle, laid down reeds to slow the flow, all with no math textbooks, no bulldozers, no apps, just intuition, observation, and a lot of sweaty trial and error. And it worked, sort of. Villages formed. The first signs of collective effort. One guy couldn't dig a canal, but 20 could. So you get cooperation. You get specialization. You get little towns popping up around good watering points. Not cities. Not yet. But soon. You pause at a dry depression where an ancient channel once ran. It's silent now, but if you squint, you can almost hear it. The trickle of water, the laughter of children cooling off, the splash of a reed boat bumping against the edge. This land remembers, even if you don't. But don't get too romantic. This was hard, exhausting work. Digging ditches in clay isn't just tough, it's brutal. You finish the day sunburned, blistered, and wondering if maybe goat herding was the better option after all. And the payoff? Uncertain. A locust swarm could eat your crop. A poorly maintained channel could dry out your field. A rival village upstream might accidentally divert more than their fair share. Ancient water politics were just as cutthroat as modern oil ones. Still, the concept was revolutionary. If you couldn't move the rain, you moved the river. You remember the names. Eridu, Uar, Lagash, Nippur, each one carved from dust, fueled by hope and muddy water. No city here could exist without irrigation. None. And here's your nightly dose of irony. The very thing that made these places flourish also made them fragile. Water brought crops, but also weeds. It brought life, but also disease. Stagnant pools bred parasites. Overwatering salted the earth. Floods shattered walls. Still, they kept digging. In a weird way, Ancient Mesopotamia was the first real attempt at climate adaptation, not the sexy kind with wind farms and Tesla batteries, the kind with reeds, rocks, and desperation. They didn't have the science, but they had urgency, and sometimes that's more motivating. So here you are, standing in the ruins of an old canal junction, thinking about how much they risked just to make this place livable, and how many times it nearly wasn't. You sit on a sun-warmed stone and sip from your imaginary goatskin flask. It tastes vaguely of dust and camel hair. Sorry. Around you, the land waits, dry, patient, unforgiving, but in the hands of the determined, it can be coaxed into something beautiful. They say necessity is the mother of invention. In Mesopotamia, necessity was the mother, father, and grumpy uncle who wouldn't shut up about rainfall totals. You wake with the sound of moving water in your ears, not a gentle trickle, but the distant, rumbling churn of rivers on the move. The Tigris and the Euphrates. These are not just bodies of water. They're the arteries of your world. And right now they're swollen, racing, and completely in charge. You stand on the bank of the Euphrates, the morning heat already shimmering on the surface. The river moves fast here, faster than you expect. And it doesn't care about your carefully planted barley or your fragile canals. It has moods. And you adapt. Mesopotamia's entire existence is a gamble. Between the Tigris on the east and the Euphrates on the west lies a massive floodplain, ideal for crops, but only if the rivers cooperate. They usually don't. You can't predict when the flood will come. You just know it will. Some years it's gentle, depositing silt like a gift from the gods. Other years, it arrives like an uninvited drunk at a wedding, smashing everything, ruining fields, and leaving you with 6 inches of muck in your sandals. And yet, those rivers are life. Without them, southern Mesopotamia would just be a hot plate of cracked dust. The average rainfall here couldn't fill a bathtub. These rivers, they fill granaries. You walk upstream and see why this is such a delicate dance. The Euphrates rises in Turkey, snowmelt territory. So its floods are seasonal, but erratic. The Tigris? It flows faster, often with more force, and can rise suddenly after mountain storms hundreds of miles away. Imagine living your life around 2 unpredictable time bombs, ones that bring dinner and disaster. Historians still argue whether early Mesopotamians preferred one river over the other. The Euphrates was easier to manage, but the Tigris gave you power, if you could handle it. Cities like Nineveh and Ashur thrived on the Tigris. Others like Ur and Babylon snuggled up the Euphrates, playing it a little safer. Now imagine trying to settle that argument without satellite maps or Doppler radar. Just bone tools, river watching, and prayer. Lots of prayer. You pass a group of farmers hunched over in the mud. They're reinforcing a canal gate, stuffing reed mats and clay into the gaps. One of them sneezes from the dust. Another curses gently at a fish that wriggled its way into the wrong sluice channel. Water doesn't stay where you put it, not unless you ask really, really nicely. And there's no break from a gamble. You're constantly negotiating with the river, diverting some here, releasing some there, keeping channels clear. Forget once, and the flood takes your granary, or your house, or you. It's worth noting that this wasn't all brute labor. There's strategy. You're trying to slow water down, not stop it. A too fast current erodes your banks. A slow one lets silt build up and chokes your flow. So you learn to curve canals, widen turns, even dig settling ponds. All without formal geometry. Just logic, patience, and maybe a little superstition. One fringe theory you hear whispered among the workers? That certain clay pots buried a key bend sweeten the river's mood. The pots are filled with river pebbles, herbs, and bits of copper. Do they work? Hard to say. But you don't not do it just in case. The rivers give, but they also take. And sometimes they take over. Picture this. It's the 3rd week of harvest, and a thunderstorm upriver you can see coming unleashes a wall of water down the Tigris. You barely have time to grab the kids. Your fields vanish. Your neighbor's sheep? Gone. You rebuild. Again. That's why every community has flood stories. And not the kind with happy endings. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's first surviving written tale, features a massive flood that wipes out humanity. Sound familiar? Some scholars still debate whether the Gilgamesh flood and Noah's Ark share a common origin. The Mesopotamians definitely had flood trauma. They wrote it into myth. Still, life keeps blooming along the banks. Cities grow bold, building closer to the water, betting on control. And when they get it right, oh, it's beautiful. Fields ripple with grain. Palm groves rise tall and orderly. Fishermen haul in baskets of carp and barbel. Boats glide across mirror-flat canals, loaded with dates, fish oil, and gossip. But don't get too comfortable, because over time, the rivers shift. Their courses change, sometimes gradually, sometimes overnight. One day, your canal is a vital supply line. The next, it's a dry scar on the earth. And your city? Suddenly, it's stranded. The gods, they say, control the rivers. But the rivers, well, they mostly control you. You squint into the sun as you spot a stone marker driven into the mud. One of the earliest river gauges. Not high-tech, just a carved pillar with marks showing the water's rise and fall. But that little post? It was your forecast, your early warning system. And you paid attention. These days, we can dam rivers with the push of a button. But back then, you did it with reeds, muscle, and raw hope. You weren't just managing water. You were surviving it. So next time you take a long shower without thinking about it, spare a thought for the folks who had to argue with the Tigris every time they wanted to water their onions. Your feet squelch into warm, wet clay. The sun's barely up, but already the air is thick, like someone poured soup into the sky. You're standing ankle deep in what looks like a muddy ditch, but is, in fact, one of humanity's earliest irrigation canals. Congratulations. You've stepped into history and probably a mosquito's breakfast. This canal may not look like much, just a shallow trench winding through dusty fields, but it's a masterpiece. Dug by hand, maintained daily, lifeblood to the barley, onions, flax, and dates that keep your city fed and somewhat less cranky. Early Mesopotamians didn't have tractors, no metal shovels. What they had were baskets, brute strength, and a lot of cooperation. You look around and see a crew of workers, each with a woven basket slung from a rope around their shoulders. They dig, scoop, dump, repeat. Their calves are caked with mud. Their brows shimmer with sweat. There's a rhythm to it, almost like a song, if songs included the occasional curse when someone stubs a toe on a hidden rock. And it's not just digging. You need to raise dikes, little embankments, to control the water flow. Too much pressure, and your canal bursts. Too little, and the water won't move. So you patch with clay, reinforce with reeds. Use palm trunks to build sluice gates that creak ominously in the wind. It's not perfect, but it's clever. Historians still argue whether the earliest canals were communal efforts or ordered by elites. Probably both. You imagine some burly officials shouting instructions while chewing on a date. But at the end of the day, it's the hands of the workers, ordinary folks like you, doing the muddy math of survival. One particularly quirky innovation, the shaduf. A simple lever with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other. You pull, the bucket dips into the water, and you swing it over into the next channel. It's not fast, but it's consistent. And it saves your back, sort of. You try using one. It looks easier than it is. You yank the rope, and the bucket lurches awkwardly. Splash, mostly on your shoes. A nearby kid snickers. Great, now you're the entertainment. But you learn quickly, because in Mesopotamia, if you don't irrigate, you don't eat. You walk down the path of canal as it branches and branches again, big ditches feeding smaller ones, like a tree with roots made of water. It's beautiful in its own muddy way. A single canal can serve an entire district if planned well. But there's the rub. It has to be planned well. A badly sloped canal floods upstream and trickles into nothing downstream. A blocked gate means an angry neighbor. And believe me, there's no rage like a farmer who sees his field bone dry, while yours is a marsh. That's why you find ditch markers, small stones or bits of fire clay. Use to measure angles and slopes. These weren't just random mud holes. They had geometry, even if no one called it that yet. Some archaeologists claim the Babylonians could calculate square roots from clay tablets. Others argue it was just instinct honed by generations. Either way, those canals worked. You pass a reed-walled hut, part tool shed, part break spot. Inside, a jug of water, some old sandals, and a strange object. A scoop shaped like a wide spoon with tiny holes drilled in the handle. A measuring tool, maybe? Or an ancient attempt at a ladle/sieve combo. No one's sure. But someone made it and used it. Every artifact here tells a story, or at least hints at one. Suddenly, a loud crack. You jump, heart racing. But it's just a section of dried mud wall collapsing into the canal. That's the other part of the job, maintenance. Every day, something breaks. A gate sticks. A trench collapses. A goat wanders in and falls asleep in the wrong ditch. If you don't fix it immediately, everything downstream suffers. So you fix it, and fix it again, and again. And because water moves slowly, so does your day. It takes hours to know if you made the slope just right, if your channels are leaking, if that tiny quiet bubble of water at the base means a full breach coming. You don't get instant feedback. You get patience and paranoia, which makes it even more impressive that these canals lasted centuries. Some were in use so long that entire cities formed around them, then collapsed and new cities rose, reusing the same ditches. Layers on layers of water wisdom. You sit on the edge of a dike and rest. The breeze carries the smell of mud, green shoots, and something faintly sulfurous, probably from a broken reed mat downstream. It's not pretty, but it's real, raw. This is where civilization was sculpted, one muddy basket at a time. You remember a fringe theory told in half-whispers, that some ancient engineers used turtles. Yes, turtles. Set them loose at the head of the canal, and follow their path to test for slope irregularities. Is it true? Who knows? But the image of a turtle engineer waddling down a ditch is too good not to keep. As you stand up, stretching your sore legs, you realize something. This isn't just about moving water. It's about moving people, coordinating them, teaching them to trust the system, to dig, maintain, and share. Because the moment one person hoards water, everyone loses. And so, with every shovelful of mud, with every carefully shaped bend and canal, the foundations of not just agriculture, but society itself take root. Because in Mesopotamia, if water doesn't flow, neither does civilization. You shuffle through a narrow alley lined with sun-dried bricks. The city hums quietly behind its walls, flies buzzing, distant splashes, the clack of ceramic jars being stacked. Welcome to Uruk, or maybe you are, or maybe Nippur. Doesn't matter. They all share the same heartbeat. Water. You've left the countryside behind and stepped into the thumping center of Mesopotamian urban life. The fields may feed the people, but it's the city where the rules are made, where temples rise, and where water becomes more than survival. It becomes structure. Behind you, the Tigris or Euphrates snakes its way just beyond the wall. Not too far, not too close. Rivers are like dogs. Keep them close enough to fetch, but not so close they chew through your floorboards. The early city planners knew this. They didn't just plop cities randomly. They chose spots where they could control the water. No control, no city. Inside the walls, it's all about channeling. Water needs to move, but not everywhere. You don't want your streets to turn into soup every time someone upstream sneezes. So, you see the outlines of an engineered system. Main canals feeding secondary ones, which run past public courtyards and private homes, each with their own scooping points, and sometimes even personal taps carved in clay. Historians still debate whether these inner-city water systems were state-run or managed by neighborhoods. Some say the temples oversaw the flow, doling it out like holy nectar. Others argue that each block was on its own, probably a little of both, depending on who was in power and how dry the season had been. You follow a young boy carrying 2 clay jugs on a yoke. He's walking toward the ziggurat, the great step temple in the heart of the city. Not for worship today. He's delivering water. Because even the gods, apparently, get thirsty. Near the temple, a main canal winds through a stone-lined trench, covered in places with slats of palm to keep out debris and nosy children. The canal is quiet now, just a whisper flow. But you can tell from the moss stains on the wall. It has moods. After a flood, it surges through here like a caffeinated ox. At intervals, you notice depressions where people scoop up water for cooking, washing, or cooling off. There's a rhythm here. You wait your turn. You nod politely. You spill a little for the ground gods, just in case. And what happens to wastewater? You follow a side canal that dribbles off from the main artery, this one cloudier, slower. It snakes behind a row of homes and carries away the graze runoff. It smells lively. Let's just say it's a good idea not to stand downwind. Some scholars argue this might be one of the earliest examples of planned wastewater management. Others think it was just, well, the path of least resistance. Either way, the city breathes in clean water and exhales a used-up version. Like a living organism. You duck under a lintel into a home. Modest, cool, surprisingly spacious. In the courtyard is a clay-lined basin, rainwater catcher, but also, if you're clever, a place to redirect canal water for storage. The rooftop has a slight slope, not a design flaw, but intentional. Channels carved into the bricks lead rainfall into jars tucked away in corners. And those jars, they're porous. That means water inside slowly evaporates through the surface, cooling it. No ice needed. Just physics. Or magic, depending on who you ask. You run your hand over a low wall and spot tiny holes drilled into the clay bricks, evidence of an early water channel sealed shut. Maybe abandoned, maybe blocked for reasons. A quirky theory says they sometimes closed old channels to prevent jealous neighbors from stealing water by night. That's right, water theft was real, and it was ruthless, which is why city governments, yes, even back then, stepped in. Some tablets describe assigned irrigation officials. Others name water rations for specific streets. It wasn't just law. It was logistics. Who gets water first? Who gets it last? Who pays for the repairs when the wall collapses and someone's goat floats down the street? You pass a low bench near the temple square. It's carved with symbols, mostly fish, reeds, and wavy lines. Not art, a public notice. It's saying, canal closed for repairs. Check back after the Festival of Inanna. Basically, it's ancient civil engineering Twitter. You keep moving. Through the bazaar, past the baker's stall, past the perfume seller hawking rosewater, which, given the general street hygiene, smells like a miracle. You notice how even the placement of vendors is guided by water access. No decent brewer sets up shop far from the canals. And those who can afford it, they live closest to the water source. Cleaner, cooler, more reliable. The poor? They haul. They wait. They bargain. Even water in ancient cities trickles through the cracks of social class. Still, there's a strange harmony to it all. The city pulses gently with its wet rhythm. Flood and drain, scoop and spill, wash and worship. The canals aren't just lifelines. They're thoroughfares, timekeepers, and social meeting points. You stand at a crossroads. 3 ditches meeting like the prongs of a trident. One flows smooth and clear. One bubbles ominously. One is nearly dry. You feel the tension. A decision needs to be made. Open a gate? Block another? Every choice ripples outward, shaping not just the next hour, but the next harvest. And you realize ancient Mesopotamian cities weren't just on the water. They were water, designed by it, ruled by it, held together by damp clay, drier hope, and the constant, quiet gurgle of canals beneath their feet. You blink against the rising sun as bells, or something like bells, echo from the temple district. It's not time to eat. It's time to ask the sky for a favor. Water in the fields? That's one thing. Water in the city? That's engineering. But rain from above? That's the God department. And in ancient Mesopotamia, you don't just hope for rain. You try to earn it. You shuffle behind a small crowd, moving toward the ziggurat's broad steps. There's incense in the air, thick as smoke but sweeter, tangled with the scent of burning myrrh and the faint stink of sheep who, frankly, don't want to be there. It's a rain ceremony. Or maybe a drought prevention ceremony. Honestly, sometimes it's hard to tell. Either way, there will be chanting, offerings, and if things go sideways, a goat or two might meet an early retirement. The temple priests stand above the crowd, robed in gold-threaded linen, and awkward hats that you're trying very hard not to laugh at. One holds a bowl of barley. Another has a scepter carved like a reed stalk. These aren't just props, they're symbolic tools. The barley represents the crop. The reed, the river. A hush falls. Then a voice, nasal, practice, full of drama, begins to chant. It's a prayer to Enki, god of water and wisdom. He's one of the more useful gods. Frankly, not too violent. Likes fish. Writes good poetry. You could do worse. The chant rolls on, echoing across mud brick walls. You feel something, not magic exactly, but tradition, muscle memory on a civilizational scale. This has been done for generations. Rain or no rain, people believe in doing something. Anything. You clap, you bow, you stay slightly out of reach of the goat. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuine religious expressions or just citywide psychological maintenance. Did people really think a dance could bring rain? Or was it a way to feel less helpless in a world where your onions might die because the sky caught a cold? You don't know. But watching the priest smear a bit of honey on the altar, you can't help but feel the earnestness. It's not just about water. It's about order. The gods up there, the people down here, and the river in between. And this isn't just a one-day affair. Temples tracked the stars to predict floods. They recorded water levels. They sent messengers upriver to see if meltwater was coming. They even built their own reservoirs, guarded by lion-headed spirits carved into the walls. A quirky practice? Sacrificing figurines made of dough into the river. Little edible humans, complete with sesame seed eyes, tossed in with solemn faces. Eat this instead of us, the priest seemed to say. Hard to tell whether the god preferred it, but the ducks certainly did. You wander deeper into the temple courtyard and find what looks like a star map etched into black stone. It's the path of the planets, supposedly used to track signs of upcoming droughts. If Jupiter lingers near the moon, expect less rain. If Venus rises crookedly, build up the canal walls. Logic? Maybe not. But patterns? Absolutely. Mesopotamians were world-class observers, if not always world-class explainers. In one corner, a man is carefully drawing the shape of the Tigris on a clay tablet. Not for fun, for record-keeping. Temples held entire archives of river behavior. Flooded early. Drought lasted 2 moons. Farmer Zoo took more than his share. Again, they even had early water quotas. You get 4 buckets. You get 6. You wait until tomorrow. This is a priest's real power, not just prayer, but paperwork. You pause by a small, cracked statue of a fishtail god with a horn crown. That's probably or Enki again, depending on how you squint. His mouth spills water, which once would have flowed into a tiny channel winding through the temple garden. Now it's dry, but the design remains. Water wasn't just utility. It was divine. A symbol of blessing, abundance, clean feet. And speaking of feet, yours are now dusty and tired. But the rituals go on. Drums thud. A woman with a painted face pours milk into a shallow basin. You wonder if this helps. If it ever helped. Then again, what's the alternative? Do nothing and wait for the sky to decide? No. You perform. You chant. You calculate the stars. You plan anyway. You climb the steps of the ziggurat slowly, carefully. Not everyone gets to see this view. The whole city below. Its canals glinting like silver ribbons. Fields beyond. Dusty workers toiling. Priests waving smoke. The river winding off toward the horizon. From up here, it almost looks peaceful. Almost. You remember a fringe tale whispered by an old temple scribe that once a priest misread the stars and announced a great flood. People panicked, built rafts, sacrificed extra goats. Nothing happened. The next year, no warning, Real flood. The priest? Promoted anyway. He got the spirit of the thing right. They said, you laugh to yourself. Maybe that's what these rituals were really about. Not prediction, not precision, just connection. A way to say, we see you, river. We respect you, sky. Please don't drown us today. The ceremony ends. The goat is spared. This time, people file out, chatting, yawning, stretching. The sun's higher now. The heat picks up. Life resumes. You descend the temple steps and think, for all our science today, for all our weather apps and dam control systems, there's still something comforting about standing with your neighbors and asking the sky for kindness, even if the sky isn't always listening. You step away from the temples, the chanting, and the sweaty goats, only to find yourself ducking into a shaded courtyard. Instantly, the heat seems to fall back a few degrees. That's not divine intervention. That's design. Inside this home, humble but smart, you find the secrets of how Mesopotamians dealt with water at the micro level. No canals, no rivers, just jars, gutters, and a lot of dusty ingenuity. The house smells of clay and cooked onions. In one corner, a young girl pours water from a narrow-necked jug into a basin. The sound is gentle, rhythmic. You notice how carefully she tips it, because this water isn't free. It was hauled, fetched, saved, maybe even bargained for. Above, the flat rooftop tells a quiet story. See the groove in the mud brick? That's not erosion. It's a tiny rain gutter. It channels water across the roof and into a collection point on the far side. Rain is rare, yes, but when it comes, you make every drop count. And that basin where the girl poured water? It sits next to a sunken clay-lined pit, filled with broken potsherds. This, apparently, is a type of early filter. The water drips through the debris, slows down, and cools slightly. Is it perfectly clean? No. Is it better than drinking river sludge? Oh, absolutely. You squat down to inspect the water jar, one of many in the courtyard. They're unglazed, meaning they sweat just a little. And as the water evaporates through the porous clay, it cools the contents inside. A natural refrigerator. No spell needed. One quirky variant? Some jars were buried halfway in the ground to keep them extra cold. And in really wealthy homes, they even surrounded the base with wet reeds to boost evaporation. Low-tech luxury at its finest. Historians still argue whether these setups were developed independently by each household or if they were passed down through formal instruction, maybe even listed on tablets somewhere as Best Water Practices, edition 2300 BCE. Either way, people figured it out. You explore further. There's a small channel leading from the basin to an exit trench, an escape path for used water. Because water, once used, becomes a problem. You can't let it pool or soak into your walls. That brings mosquitoes. Or worse, mud brick rot. In one corner, you notice a primitive clay pipe poking from a wall, its end worn smooth. Indoor drainage? Possibly. Or maybe a rain diverter. There are stories of multi-house dwellings with shared water catchment areas. Cooperation by necessity. Because when water is scarce, even your rival's leaky roof might be your blessing. You step outside and wander down the narrow alleyways. You pass homes with rooftop pots, some half-filled, others covered with palm fronds. Every inch of surface that can catch water does. It's almost a reflex. Rain happens so infrequently that when it does, it becomes a community event. Imagine the scene, a sudden summer storm. Kids dancing. Neighbors scrambling to pull out every available pot, bowl, or helmet. Laughter. Yelling. The frantic joy of wetness from above. And afterward, a shared meal. Because water makes everything taste better. But it's not always about the rain. For most homes, daily water comes from the street-side canals. And that means carrying it, heavy, awkward, back-breaking work. Usually done by the young, the poor, or, let's be honest, the wife. You hear a thud and a groan. A boy drops his clay jug. It shatters. Everyone winces. Not just because of the noise, but because that's wasted effort, wasted water. His mother scolds him softly, but also hands him another jug. The work never ends. And of course, water security means theft is always lurking in the background. Some homes have lids made of leather or wood. Others hide their pots indoors. One particularly clever method? Plugging jars with waxcloth and sealing them with rope, both to prevent evaporation and to discourage thirsty neighbors. You catch wind of a fringe rumor that in one city, the wealthiest families trained small dogs to guard their water jars, barking, biting, and probably drinking from them when no one was looking. Were they effective? Doubtful. Were they adorable? Most certainly. In another alley, you spot a slightly larger home. Someone with money. Inside is a recessed clay pool, polished and shaped like a modern sink. You even see a raised edge with a small groove, perhaps a spillway for overflow. Could this be indoor plumbing? Sort of. Wealthy households sometimes installed rudimentary water systems, gravity-fed, usually, with stored water at roof level dripping down through a pipe into a basin below. One tablet even suggests that certain homes had drain tiles leading all the way to the outer sewer ditches. Hygiene meets status. Still, even the rich couldn't ignore the limitations. Pipes clogged, mud shifted, and without constant maintenance, your fancy drainage system just became a slow-moving disaster zone. So you find this beautiful tension. Simplicity driven by need, innovation born from limits. No one in Mesopotamia was trying to invent the faucet. They were just trying to keep dinner from being both dry and gritty. You sit on a low wall, watching the neighborhood at work. Children carry jugs. Women ladle water into cooking pots. An old man washes his face slowly, luxuriously, as if the cold water is a once-in-a-week miracle. It strikes you. This whole city doesn't just use water. It orchestrates it. From rooftops to basins, from clay pots to pipes, every element has a role. And yet, the system is fragile. One cracked pipe, one missed rain, one clogged drain. It doesn't take much for things to fall apart. But here's the wonder. Even in this dry, brutal place, people figured it out. They made do. They invented comfort where none should have existed, and all without a single faucet. The first warning is a faint murmur, a deep, low hum like a bowl being tapped underwater. Then a breeze. Not the kind that cools, the kind that unsettles. You look to the horizon, and there it is, a shimmering bulge in a river, bulging too early, too fast. Flood season is here, and it's not being polite about it. You climb to higher ground, more like a mound of compacted brick and rubble that passes for a hill, and watch the Euphrates twitch in its banks. Its surface is no longer placid. It moves with purpose, like a muscle tightening. Downstream, farmers are already panicking. You hear the faint thump of boots on clay, the clatter of sluice gates being yanked shut, the urgent yell of a foreman who did not wake up expecting a crisis today. This isn't your first flood. You've seen how a bad one can peel a canal open like an old scab. You've seen entire granaries turn into porridge. One man lost a goat. Another lost 4 generations of family land under 6 feet of water, and a particularly sarcastic catfish. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamians had an organized early warning system for floods. There's evidence of water level markers. Yes. There's mention of watchers upstream who ran messages down the line. But was it systematic? Or just the world's oldest version of, oh, better tell someone? Either way, today's warning came too late. Down in the fields, water pours over a canal wall, turning furrows into foam. Men rush in with reed mats and clay, trying to plug the breach. It's a losing battle. For every handful of mud, the river shrugs and asks for 10 more. And remember, these aren't huge, deep canals. They're 2, maybe 3 feet wide. They're not made for punishment. They're made for precision. And when the river gets mean, they crumble. You walk with the crowd as it pulls back toward the city walls. Not out of fear, out of respect. Because the Mesopotamians feared water in a way we've mostly forgotten. They didn't just use it. They negotiated with it. You pass a field where last week, onions grew in neat rows. Now it's a soup bowl. A boy wades up to his waist to rescue a basket of seed grain. He trips. The grain spills. A goat bleats from a distant rooftop. This was someone's harvest. Someone's hope. And then comes the worst part. Not the flood itself, but the aftermath. When the water recedes, it doesn't leave clean canals and tidy lines. It leaves chaos. Silt in all the wrong places. Saltwater intrusion. Broken gates. Dead animals. Fungus. People forget that standing water is dangerous. Not just slippery and smelly. Diseased. The ancient Mesopotamians knew this. After every major flood, you'll find evidence of ritual cleansing, burning reeds, offering bowls, sometimes even public water bans. A quirky habit? Sprinkling crushed bitumen, yes, tar, around water entry points to seal in the good and block out the evil. Did it work? Possibly. Or maybe the strong smell just kept bugs away. Back at the city gates, you find scribes already at work, scribbling on wet tablets, tallying damages. West Gate Canal breached. Palm Grove, 75% submerged. Cattle yard situation mushy. It's bureaucracy, yes, but also survival. Someone needs to know what broke and who's to blame. One official carries a thin staff topped with a crescent. He's from the Water Bureau. His job? To inspect canal walls. He pokes the ground with the staff, notes how deep it sinks. If it's more than a finger length, repairs begin. If not, well, the gods will sort out. Spoiler, they rarely do. You climb onto a roof with a few other curious residents and look out. The city itself is holding, for now. The walls channel runoff. The streets slope subtly toward drains. But the outer ring? A wet mess. And here's the dirty secret of Mesopotamian water management. It was reactive. Yes, they planned canals. Yes, they built dikes. But the river always had the last word. All they could do was clean up fast and pray the next time would be kinder. One fringe theory from ancient texts claims that priests could see floods in their dreams, that they'd wake with soaked robes and know. Most likely, they just had better instincts, or maybe lived closer to the river. Still, people listened, because in Mesopotamia, you don't question anyone who's dry in flood season. The sun dips low. The worst has passed. The river is receding. Not calmly, but without further tantrums. Children begin to splash in leftover puddles. Adults start patching the worst breaches. A donkey sneezes in a particularly foul-smelling ditch. Life somehow returns. You help carry a broken gate plank to the carpenter's hut. He eyes it, sniffs the soggy wood, and mutters again. You nod. He shrugs and gets to work. There's no lecture, just a rhythm. Break, build, break again. Because in Mesopotamia, water doesn't just come and go. It tests you. And every year, you have to prove you're still paying attention. So as you sit down on a stone bench, your boots dripping, your hands coated in the memory of rushing brown water, you realize something. The canals, the dikes, the jars, the prayers, they aren't there to stop the flood. They're there to make sure you're ready when it comes. The mud in your hands is different this time, grainy, bitter, and strangely crusted. You crumble a handful and taste the air, salty. Not sea air salty, soil salty. And that's a problem, one the ancients never quite solved. Welcome to one of Mesopotamia's slowest disasters, salinization. After centuries of building canals, managing floods, and mastering water flow, the ancient farmers of Sumer noticed something peculiar. Their fields started producing less. Barley shrank. Wheat withered. The ground began to look wrong. Pale streaks marred the surface. Crops died faster than the river could feed them. You kneel next to a withered patch of land. What looks like white sand is actually salt left behind from repeated irrigation. It's the byproduct of victory, the catch nobody noticed until it was too late. Here's the twist. Irrigation brings water to dry land, but in hot places like Mesopotamia, most of that water evaporates before plants can drink it, and it leaves all its mineral friends behind. Over time, those minerals, especially salts, build up in the soil, choking the roots and making the land less and less fertile. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians fully understood what was happening. Some records show changes in crop types. Wheat, which is more salt-sensitive, gives way to barley, which is hardier. Eventually, even barley began to fail. Was it bad luck? Or did they realize the fields themselves were turning toxic? You wander into the edge of a ghost farm, abandoned, silent. The irrigation ditches are cracked and dry. The date palms are stunted. A single broken plow lies half buried. Like a fossil of human hope. One quirky solution the ancients tried, crop rotation with fallow years, letting the land rest in hopes the salt would sink lower. Sometimes they even flooded fields on purpose during off-seasons to flush out minerals. It helped, temporarily, but the damage was cumulative. And the worst part? It happened slowly. Not like a flood, where you can blame the river. This was a creeping failure. Each season just a little worse than the last. No one dramatic collapse, just slow economic suffocation. You meet an old man staring at a dry canal. He mutters something about the sweetness of water being lost. Not flavor, freshness. The word they use for fresh water, Z, also meant life. When water goes bad, life follows. In one nearby town, you hear they even move the entire village uphill to escape salt-poisoned fields. But uphill meant farther from a river, which meant longer water hauls, which meant more effort and more risk. Some stayed behind. Their fields still gleam faintly with white crust. You dig your heel into the earth and find it powdery beneath the surface. That's not a good sign. Plants can't grow here. They might sprout, sure, but they'll shrivel. And no amount of goat manure or temple blessing can change that. Some archaeologists believe that the decline of Sumer wasn't due to war or famine, but salt. The cities didn't burn. They just emptied one bad harvest at a time. People left, slowly, quietly, one clay tablet farewell letter at a time. You stand on the edge of a canal that once fed a dozen fields. Now it feeds weeds and regret. You think back to the effort, generations of people shaping this land, bending rivers, building temples, all brought down by invisible crystals in the dirt. It's not like they didn't try. One tablet records a decree limiting irrigation during certain months, an ancient water use restriction. Another mentions rewards for building new dikes to direct overflow. People noticed. They responded, just not fast enough. A fringe theory suggests they even had an assault priest, not a divine figure, but government official tasked with testing soil by taste. Was he effective? Probably not. But hey, if your crops are dying, licking dirt starts to seem reasonable. You pass a woman spreading crushed charcoal over a small garden, a trick meant to absorb salt. Her plot looks healthier than the rest. She smiles, says something about her grandmother teaching her this. The old ways adapting quietly, but the larger systems didn't pivot. The canals kept flowing. The floods kept coming. The soil kept dying. And eventually, cities like UR lost their golden fields. You enter the remains of one such city. Its once grand gate now silent. Its canal system clogged with dust. There's a plaque, half buried. The name of a ruler who once sponsored a grand irrigation project. His titles are long. His canals are dry. You sit on the edge of a silted canal and let the silence speak. In Mesopotamia, water was life. But too much of it, used the wrong way, slowly became death. And the people who once danced for rain, they learned, too late, that sometimes even blessings can rot your roots. You're not in the fields anymore. You're in a room, small, shaded, and filled with the sweets and a hot clay and something a little tense. Maybe it's the mood. Or maybe it's the farmer glaring at his neighbor like he's about to throw a stylus across the room. Welcome to the water tribunal. When water is life and canals are arteries, a single block ditch becomes a war crime. That's why ancient Mesopotamia didn't just engineer canals. They regulated them with laws, with judges, and sometimes with fines steep enough to make you consider dry farming in the mountains instead. The room is warm and cramped. A scribe sits cross-legged on a mat, tapping at a half-wet tablet. The clay is soft, but his glare is firm. He reads a complaint. Farmer Corps has blocked the west ditch to flood his orchard. Farmer Gill's barley is dead. Demands restitution. 5 measures of grain or 1 healthy donkey. The accused? Corps, a man with mud still caked to his knees, and the guilty shrug of someone who definitely knows what he did. Mesopotamian cities, particularly Babylon and Lagash, took irrigation law seriously. You probably heard of Hammurabi, the king with the code. Most people remember the eye for an eye bit. Few recall the long list of water laws tucked into that same tablet. Historians still argue how strictly these laws were enforced across the kingdom, but the fact that they exist tells you something. This wasn't chaos. This was an early form of civil engineering backed by civil justice. For example, if a man neglects to strengthen his dike and the water breaks through, flooding his neighbor's field, you shall pay for the loss. Pretty clear, right? Even clearer. If you couldn't pay, you worked that neighbor's field until the damage was repaid. One canal breach, and suddenly you're doing someone else's harvest in the worst heat of the year. And it wasn't just about breaches. Water theft? Punishable. Failure to deliver your share to a downstream farmer? Fine. Damaging a public sluice gate? Oh, you're in for a world of hurt. One quirky case from Lagash involved a man being forced to rebuild a 30-cubic canal wall by himself in 3 days. The tablets note that he did not finish on time. The punishment is not recorded, which is ominous. You walk through a public notice area. Clay tablets hung like signs, each with symbols indicating which canals are open, which ones are under maintenance, and which are restricted due to overuse. Think of it like ancient infrastructure Twitter, except no one can argue anonymously, and there's actual mud on your notifications. And the bureaucracy? Oh, it's layered. You've got water inspectors who patrol the canal network, scribes who log daily flow levels, temple officials who monitor sacred springs, and, of course, your friendly neighborhood Sarasu, the irrigation foreman, who knows exactly which gate you tampered with last week. A fringe theory claims these officials had a secret test, inserting a small stick into the canal to measure silt flow. If the stick came back blackened or sluggish, someone upstream was cheating the flow. Maybe that official just wanted an excuse to yell at core again. You pass a pile of old tablets stored in the civic archive, hundreds of years old, some crumbling. Most are mundane. Canal X delivered 11 cubits of water on the 5th day of Nisanu. But some, scandalous. Family dispute over orchard flooding. Accusations of bribe. Official reassigned. Bureaucrats have always been dramatic. And yet, despite the conflict, the system worked. Not perfectly, not forever, but for centuries. Farmers knew their turn. Cities coordinated shared labor days to dredge canals, like civic holidays, but with more shovels and fewer snacks. You even find a classroom of sorts, a group of teenage scribes practicing irrigation math. One scratches out numbers showing canal capacity versus field saturation. Another calculates labor cost to reroute a flow. They're not just studying writing. They're studying hydraulics. Because here's the truth. If you lived in ancient Mesopotamia, you didn't just need to know your gods and your goats. You needed to understand flow rates. You needed to understand cause and effect. Because one mistake upstream can starve an entire district downstream. And people don't forget that sort of thing. You walk along the city's southern wall, where a judge's stone chair overlooks a central canal, not for decoration, for oversight. The idea was simple. Let the people see justice at the water's edge. A farmer testifies. A witness confirms. A verdict is carved right there, etched into clay and left to dry in the sun. The law couldn't make the rain fall, but it could make sure everyone shared fairly once it did. And when all else failed, there was a public shame ditch. Yes, that's real. In at least one city, a small canal near the market square served no purpose except as a dumping ground for broken tools and reputation. If your name showed up too many times in water disputes, your tools went there, smashed, displayed, mocked. You watch a man glance nervously at the ditch, then carefully rebury his canal marker in the correct place. Fair is fair. The sun gleams off a stone tablet like it's winking at you, just beneath the carving of a bearded man, arms wide, foot firmly planted atop a flowing canal. You squint. It's not a priest. It's a king, or more specifically, a king posing with his canal. That's right. In Mesopotamia, controlling water wasn't just survival. It was status. Rulers didn't just build palaces. They built waterways. And then they carved their names into them so you wouldn't forget who made your crops grow. You walk along the edge of a broad canal, its walls reinforced with stones that have names etched into them. Dug under the gaze of King Shulgi. Strengthened by order of Rimsin. Blessed by the hand of Sargon. No modesty here, just mud, might, and marketing. Historians still argue whether these royal inscriptions reflect actual involvement in engineering or just ceremonial credit. Did kings really plan these canals, or just show up for the ribbon cutting? Maybe both. Some records suggest rulers assigned entire teams of surveyors, masons, and laborers. Others mention kings getting their hands dirty, symbolically. Still, you can't ignore the fact that water was political power. If you brought the flood under control, you weren't just king of the city. You were king of the food. The temple could pray for rain, but only the palace could make it flow exactly where it needed to. One quirky find from Larsa, a clay map showing a canal complex shaped vaguely like a lion, complete with paw ditches and tail streams. It wasn't necessary, but it made the king look good. And looking good while feeding your people, that's an unbeatable combination. You pass a canal monument, a vertical stone, not very tall, but unmistakable in its bold proclamation. I am Metina, widen this canal by 12 cubits and silence the mouths of drought. Subtle. And yes, the mouths of drought were apparently very loud. These projects weren't small scale. We're talking tens of miles of canal, dug, maintained, expanded. And when you were king, you weren't just building for today. You were inscribing your legacy into the very bones of the earth. You walked through the ruins of an old control station, where sluice gates once let water in or kept it out depending on the season. A large lever, now petrified with age, once required 4 men to operate. On the wall nearby is a faded relief. Workers bending, water flowing, the king watching, always watching. And it wasn't just about farms. Royal canals fed temple gardens, palace baths, ceremonial fountains, even sacred fish ponds. Yes, that was a thing. One Babylonian king built a pond specifically for giant carp, worthy of the goddess Ninhursag. Did she ask for it? Unclear. Did the people nod approvingly? Oh, yes. Control over water often meant control over who could farm, and where. Royal grants gave plots of land, with canal access, to loyal subjects. Take away that access, and suddenly that barley farmer becomes just a guy with dry dirt. And kings use this power with flair. You hear whispers of one ruler who ordered a new canal to be dug not for irrigation, but to bypass a rebellious city entirely, cutting off its trade, its food, and its patience. The city surrendered within a month. You come across a half-buried clay pipe, thicker than most, running toward what was once a royal compound. A small plaque beside it reads, "For the washing of royal feet." Not joking. Kings got their own waterline. Because if divine right means anything, it means never fetching your own bathwater. At one capital, the ruler had an artificial lake dug, just to watch the moon reflect on it during festivals. Engineers built a channel to feed it, a gate to control its level, and guards to make sure commoners didn't use it as a swimming hole. Mesopotamian kings weren't just leaders. They were curators of water aesthetics. You sit near the base of Canal Monument. Its once bold inscriptions fading. Time has softened the edges. The water is gone, but the message lingers. There's something poetic about it, really. To rule here was to bend water, to master the unmasterable, to turn floods into harvests, rivers into reputation. And if the crops failed, if the canals silted up, if the water turned against the city, well, kings could blame the gods, or the engineers, or both. A fringe tale claims one ancient king punished a failed canal builder by making him sleep in the dry ditch until the water pitted him. No one knows what that means exactly, but it probably wasn't a compliment. Still, these rulers left behind more than just laws and statues. They left infrastructure, foundations, channels that still shape the land even now. Some modern irrigation routes trace the exact paths first etched by royal command 4,000 years ago. Their power may have faded, but their canals? Still flowing. You run your hand along the old canal wall. Smooth, sun-warmed, impossibly old. Somewhere, a barley stalk grows tall because of this ditch. Somewhere, a king will be proud.